Hello and welcome. My name is Derek Taylor. I am your professor for HIST 140 U.S. History to 1877. You're taking this course online. You are taking it, it is a remote course, but it is asynchronous. That is to say, it is not, you're not meeting at a set time and having Zoom meetings. So this is your introduction to the course. And I'm going to go through the course in detail, outline specifically what I expect of you, what I expect you to do, and give you some pointers and talk about American history as an introduction to the study of history in a scholarly setting, which is what you're getting here as a Western sort of survey course to begin your career. Most of you have been taking this at the beginning of your college career. So let me share the screen here. If you don't know, if you're logging in this course for the first time, you're taking this course. It's mostly going to be taken through Canvas. This is the online learning platform we have here at Johnson County Community College. And you'll find everything you're going to need on the Canvas page. There should be a menu of modules. When you have this here, the course introduction says, please read, you'll be watching this video. And you're going to have in a list of things, as you can see, all sequential, all laid out. First thing to go here, we'll go over the syllabus, go there and talk about it for a second, go through all the things that are required in the course. Screen. So this is the course. My name, Derek Taylor, there at the top. My office number at JCCC, my email address, my office there. Office hours for this will be by appointment. If you need to, I can meet on campus. And you have the rest of the information, the section number, and so on and so forth. So this is a survey course. And this means you're going to get a broad overview of the period in question, from about the period of exploration, the 1450s, the 15th century, all the way up to the era of Reconstruction. And we're going to talk about you're going to discuss and read primary and secondary sources in this period, as well as get a broad narrative about the events, all the important events and changes in this time frame for the United States. And basically, we want you to be familiar with a few things by the end of the course. One is basic methods, very basic methods of historical research, and analytical skills. That just means reading primary sources mostly through test and written work, to read and interpret primary and secondary historical documents. One of the things you should know when you get out of college is the difference between a primary and secondary source. I'll go over this in a second. And interpret them with accuracy. And then basic information, right? Things you're probably expecting to learn here. Basic information about people, events, trends in American history, the major developments, society, politics, economic, culture, and religion in this period. And so, again, broad overview is what a survey course is. You'll be graded according to these criteria. 20% of the course will be online discussion. I'll see in a moment. You'll post stuff in a discussion forum. I'll explain all this in a moment. There'll be weekly quizzes you'll have to take based on the weekly readings and your assigned readings. There will be 3 written assignments in this class, as well as a final exam. We'll discuss that in a moment as well. Your grading scale is standard. 190 is an A, 89 to 80 is a B, 79 to 70 is a C, and so on and so forth. Your required texts are 3 really. One is America, A Concise History, Volume 1 to 1877. We have the edition there, 6th edition, Bedford St. Martin's. You have the ISBN number, should be accurate. It is available at the JCCC bookstore, or you can get it from online booksellers. There is an earlier edition of the combined volume of this work. America Concise History is it's 2 volumes. The first half goes to 1877, the second goes to present day. That combined volume is more or less the first part of it's the same thing as these things as the separate volume 1. And Secondly, you have another book called Major Problems in American History. And that's actually probably wrong there. Volume 1 to 1877. Now, this is actually wrong. It's not available at the Internet Archive. I'll get to the Internet Archive in a second, but you have to buy this one. This one is the 4th edition, and it says it's available. You have to get it from the JCC bookstore or from online booksellers. It's not available on the Internet Archive. I need to change that. That's incorrect. If you don't know what the Internet Archive is, it's very useful. It is it's an online library you can borrow books from. It has a lot of stuff on there. Thirdly, you're going to be writing a book review of a book called Complicity by Ann Farrow, Jennifer Frank, and Joel Lang, How the North Promoted, Prolonged, and Profited from Slavery. There is one copy of this available at the JCC library. You could probably find it at your local library, definitely from online booksellers. You can also borrow it from the Internet Archive. You should definitely borrow that if you get a chance. You'll need that. I didn't make that clear on the syllabus. You'll also be required to read some other texts I'm going to provide to you. They're all modules on Canvas as PDFs. Having said all that, you need to have these editions of these books. Again, a little leeway with the first one there, American Concise History, but really you need to have them. The reason why is when I grade your papers or when you post a question and you're referring to the text in your online discussion forum, if you refer to a different edition, it may be different page numbers. In terms of the major problems in American history, I didn't explain this. Major problems in American history is a source reader. It has documents, images, and other things from the period under question. That's what a primary source is. It's primary documents that were created at the time by the people living through the events that you're studying at a later period. And different editions of that reader have different sources in them. So if you cite something in there, and the point is, if I have to go diving around looking for what page or what edition that you're referring to, I'm going to dock you points for your grade. It's going to hurt your grade, in other words. So get the proper editions. Again, I put the Internet Archive stuff on there, so in case you slip up or it takes time to get the books or whatever. But on your actual assignments, you need to refer to these, because if you don't, I'm going to take it. I'm going to lower your grade for it. So just so we're clear. Now, to how you're going to be evaluated in terms of your performance. First, there's going to be a weekly discussion forum. Is a weekly discussion forum. And for each week, you're going to have a list of assigned readings. I'll go through this in a moment. And you'll post one question over that week's readings, which reference both textbooks. One question about something from the America textbook, and a question on a specific source from the major problem source reader. That is to say, okay, this week we're reading about the American Revolution. Ask it could be a more general question, right? Try to ask questions that get people. The whole point is try to simulate a face-to-face discussion here. So one question, about the textbook, about the narrative. The textbook gives you the overall narrative, and then the major problem reader gives you the primary sources. The primary sources are the basis for the narrative that these historians tell in the textbook. And so I want you to ask one question about both. And I'm going to take off points for you if you don't do that. Your grade will suffer. I want you to try to connect your questions to these readings. So, I'll show you in a moment the textbook of what I mean by these major problems in the source reader. So you'll see what I mean by this. I want to finish all this stuff. And so you have to basically post two questions. One, probably a more broader question about an event or a trend or a person from the America, your textbook, the narrative, and then one question on a source from the major problem source reader. And you're going to have to respond to at least 3 of your fellow students' questions. Again, I'll get a little bit of discussion going. Again, I'm not expecting this to be anything epic, but you need to that's how you learn, is asking questions and learning from each other. I also, by the way, I didn't put this in the syllabus, I don't know why, I'll be reading your questions every week. I'll be responding to them as well. So I'm definitely paying attention. And I will, from time to time, if I don't think the quality of the discussion is good enough, I'll I'll lower all your grades and I'll send you an announcement that, hey, you need to do things differently. So most people do this okay once they get a hang of it, I think, but at least to my standards. There will also be 15 quizzes, one per week, on the chapter readings in the America textbook, and a few questions on the major problem source reader. So questions on the sources too. These quizzes aren't timed. You can probably utilize your textbooks, but you'll only have one attempt at them. Or as writing assignments, you'll have 3. The first, you're going to write a 2-page, double-spaced comparison between 2 primary sources that I provide in the modules. I'll go over those in a second. Excuse me. The second assignment will call for you to read a scholarly article and examine its contents. And details for that assignment, which I'll go over in a moment. All this is found in the modules on Canvas. Your final assignment will be, as I mentioned before, a book review. It'd be a book review of that work I already mentioned, Complicity, How the North Promoted, Prolonged, Buffeted from Slavery. For this assignment, you'll be asked to answer a series of questions regarding the book and discuss elements in it. Again, I'll go through the requirements in a moment. Finally, there'll be a final exam in this course. Like the quizzes taken via Canvas, it's an online exam on the date specified in the course schedule. The exam will be cumulative and will be timed. You'll have 2 hours online, unless you have some accommodations you need to give me more time for. You have to contact the accommodations office for that. But it will consist of questions drawn from the quizzes. So it'll be cumulative, but there will not be new material on the final exam. Class policies, due dates, and late work. Everything as we go through the course schedule has dates for it. To be set out there clearly. Discussion posts are due on the dates in the discussion modules and the course schedule. Quizzes are due on the due dates indicated in the course schedule. It's usually every, I think, Friday. We'll show you the dates in a second. The book review is due on December 10th. We'll go over the course schedule in a second. This is key here. Late work will not be accepted, except in case of a documented emergency, which means a death or a serious health or medical crisis involving you or an immediate family member. Part of the reason you take a course like this, the asynchronous course, is you can do it at your leisure, except for I had you do stuff every week, make sure you're involved because you need to do that. But you can turn things in ahead of time. It's not, so vacations, work schedules, computer or car troubles, again, you have to be ready to go. You have to have a computer available. Your work can't be an issue. Your work schedule is your responsibility, not mine. I cannot alter the course just for you. And again, make sure your computer's working before you do this. So keep that in mind. In terms of my availability, I'm going to be available. I'm going to contact you a lot, via email, via announcements. You can contact me most easily by my email address, my Johnson County email address, which I'll check every day. There's a chat function if you absolutely need to meet privately. We can meet in person if you want to set up an appointment on the main campus. My office is listed at the top of the syllabus, as I've already discussed. And then finally, well, not finally, but one of the things here I want to talk about here is plagiarism. Cheating or any kind of getting any kind of academic dishonesty will result in a failing grade for the assignment you cheated on. You really can't do this with the exams, but with the writing assignments you can. And you can be subject to further penalties, which can include an immediate F for the course, and even up to and including expulsion from the college. You must turn in the papers via the Dropbox on Canvas. If you do not, you will get a 0 for this. And you must not plagiarize. And again, a lot of you, this is your first time in college. It is welcome, but you must not represent your work, someone else's work as your own. And so I'll give you a definition of plagiarism. Representing all or part of someone else's work as your own and copying anything, including wording, no matter how short, from something written by someone else without citing the source. A lot of you like to copy and paste things. I get it. You do that. Don't just copy and paste things from some internet source, which you shouldn't be using anyway, by the way, for these too much. Your work, you'll see from the Canvas modules, as I'll show you, is going to be checked by Turnitin.com. It checks it against stuff on the internet. you're not gonna get away with it if you're trying to do it intentionally. Don't do it unintentionally. I'll take off points for it anyway. Unless you're going to quote something, again, put it in quotation marks, you'll cite it. I'll show you how in a moment, but it should be rewritten in your own words, in an expression that's not the exact, not anything like what you got from the source itself. Again, here, you must not borrow phraseology even from the textbook. It's that important. So those are the parameters of the course. Course schedule. You're going to start in earnest. So get a hold of textbooks as soon as possible. If you're waiting for it, you can try the stuff on the Internet Archive to begin with, but get the actual books and the editions. First week's colliding chapters. Chapter 1, the American textbook, goes along with the textbook, the module. Chapter 1 spouts European exploration and colonization of the Americas. And then chapter 1 of major problems, which also talks about, I give you the first couple of pages in that book, and I'll show you the book in a second, which will talk about what primary and secondary sources are, which I'll repeat here for you. And then the sources in that reader as well. Note, you're going to have quizzes due every week. Again, the quiz we do on Friday. In terms of discussing the works, I'm going to ask you post your questions by basically by Thursday of every week, and respond to questions by a few days later. The reason I do, I mean, maybe that's Friday, I don't know. The reason I do this is because I want people to have time to respond to questions. And in any case, if you, as you'll see, when you try to respond, you won't be able to see, you won't be able to respond until you've already posted your questions. So it's already set up where you have to post something in order to respond to other people in the actual discussion forum. So make sure you get your questions posted by 8:26. There's a timestamp, so I'll know if you got that on time. You'll lose your credit. You'll get basically you won't get full credit for the assignment. I think it's like 12 points or something like this, or maybe excuse me, 15 points or 10 points. I can't remember what it is at this point. How many points you get for each of these forums, but you'll lose your grade for this if you don't get them done on time. And you see it goes week by week. Every module is more or less the same. It has the dates. Again, you have the discussion module. There'll be some extra readings in on occasion. Module 4, I'll show you some of the stuff in a second, where I post some PDFs, British Empire docs I'll talk about in a second. And then it also has dates for other assignments. So your first writing assignment will be due on the 18th, I believe. Check the dates on that. It's the first writing assignment. We'll go through and talk about this in a second. September 18th, and so on and so forth. And I'll go through each, every section from the colonial period up through the American Revolution, making the Constitution. I won't belabor this. You're going to go through some of this yourself. You also have some links to some other stuff in here. This, for example, I'll have you watch a bit of a documentary 1 week, which give you an outside link, so you'll watch some of that. So one last thing to note about this, and it has the date for the final exam when it's due. One last thing is I reserve the right to make alterations to this syllabus as needed. So if something comes up that's not covered, I'll cover it. This doesn't mean I'm going to change the grading system. I'm not going to add new assignments or anything like that. But it's just there as a fail-safe in case there's something that we didn't anticipate with the course. And so that is the syllabus. Now let me go through some of the things in the course and the modules and show you how this works. Take a look at this week's module. You have a quiz. You'll have, which will be due on August 27th, which I believe is Friday or Saturday. I think it's Saturday, actually. So you'll have that due on a Friday. Again, the module you'll see here. I'll click on this to show you. This is the discussion forum for this week, and you'll have the readings listed. You'll have the instructions there in every single one of these. And again, what you'll do is you'll post your questions on a Thursday and turn this in, I believe, on a Saturday. or no, on a Sunday. Excuse me, turn it on a Sunday. Basically, they're due a couple days later, the actual responses. So 2 questions by 8:26, and then 3 responses to your fellow students by 8:28. And it's that way pretty much every week, except for, I believe, if you go through the course schedule, I didn't go through it, but there's nothing on the week of Thanksgiving. I give you 2 modules. You'll have a couple of chapters to read for the last extra reading for the last week, basically, and that's about it. Now, let me go over and show you the written assignments. So you're going to have 3 written assignments. I'll go through each of these, actually. So the first written assignments will be about comparing 2 primary sources. And just to give you the experience of reading 2 different documents from a primary source reader. I'm not actually not reader, 2 primary sources about a particular event. And the 2 sources I provide for you, and I'll show you those in a second in the module, are 2 different plans for a continental parliament. This is when the American colonies they're still colonies of Great Britain in the early 1740s and 50s. 2 different people come up with the idea that the American colonies should have their own sort of continental, assembly, continent-wide assembly. A guy named Martin Bladen, who was a British bureaucrat. He was he worked for the British government, and one by Benjamin Franklin from a later period. And so I have you compare these 2 things and just describe the similarities and differences between them. Now, I give you some background on both these people. I won't go through it, but they're different people with very different aims for why they want to have a continental assembly to a certain degree. So they also have some similarities. You can see with that. But basically want to see you compare and contrast these things. And you'll have that there. And you'll also have a grading rubric, what you need to do for this. And so it's pretty simple. Most people do okay with it. And the point is to try to see these documents in their historical context, because I'll give you the background here. Martin Bladen was actually writing this. He wrote his plan for a continental assembly, which he submitted to the British government, to the British Crown. It was shelved. It was never even considered. Same thing happened to Benjamin Franklin's in 1755. Martin Bladen wrote his during a time period when the British government was at war with Spain. Spain was one of their rivals in the New World, and so there was a concern about the military threat from Spain. Whereas in 1755, if you know where this is going, Benjamin Franklin writes his plan for a colonial continental assembly when the British are at war with France in the French and Indian War. Remember, they're fighting for supremacy on the continent, and so they're both tied to military concerns. So that's comparing and contrasting those as your first writing assignment. And back down here, and that's due September 18th. These are the documents. This is in the writing assignments module. There's Empire Docs. They're kind of not given much intro to Martin Bladen's actual plan, and so I give you this here. It's him. This is him, Martin Bladen. Reasons for appointing a captain general for the continent of North America. You can go through and read that. The last part, it's only a few pages. This is much longer than Benjamin Franklin's, which is pretty just a sketch, as you can kind of see. I'll go through. And it's kind of, you may have to download it. It shouldn't be like this. I may have to download it and get the thing up right side up. But you have Benjamin Franklin has taken another source reader, so it gives you a little introduction there. But it goes through a list of about 25 things that he wants to have for this assembly and this plan. So that's that aspect of the course. So your second assignment will be reading a scholarly article. And what I'm going to have you do is read an article. Actually, I'm assigning in one of the earlier modules here, week 9, transformation of the American economy. It's about economic transformation of the United States once it became a country after the revolution. And you have to read this article, which is called "The Enemy Is Us." And "The Enemy Is Us" is by it's called "The Enemy Is Us: Democratic Capitalism in the Early Republic" by Gordon Wood. Gordon Wood is retired now, but he's one of the most well-regarded academic historians of the American Revolution. He's written a bunch of books, popular books. People like them, I guess. He's a great historian. I haven't read any of them, but I've met him once, actually. But he's writing this article, and the whole point of this is to get you to understand what scholarly historians do. Partly because you come to college, you probably have the idea that history is just a story about the past. And it's a little more complicated than that. That is, of course, one definition of it. But the way that scholars do history is a little different. They don't just sort of ask people about the past or, consult somebody else's chronicle. They go and look at the surviving evidence from the event they want to study or the time period they want to study. That's what primary sources are. That's the difference between what a modern historian does is create a narrative based on primary sources. That's what a secondary source is. Secondary source is your textbook. That's a secondary source because it's historians looking back at something in the past. Whereas a primary source is something written by, if you're studying the American Revolution, the letters of George Washington are indispensable because he was a main player in that. One of the things that historians do in the academic world and the scholarly world is they argue about the causes of things, about the significance of things. And one of the things I'm having you do in here is, and it says that right there, is pay close attention to the language the author uses and to his arguments. In this essay that Gordon Wood writes, he is describing a debate among historians. He gives his own argument as well, but he describes the debate among scholarly historians over whether or not the early American Republic was capitalist or not. And basically what I want you to do here is read, and I have you do this because it's hard to understand if you've never read scholarly articles before. It's to give you the skill of reading them. It's a skill. It takes effort and time. 2 things you need to do, or excuse me, 4 things. One is identify the main thesis of the article. Now, this article, he's describing the debate. He's trying to describe the debate. He's also making a contribution to it. So if the point of the essay is to describe a debate about whether or not the United States, early United States was a capitalist society or not, his thesis is going to have something to do with that. What's his take on, the early United States? What's his, because he's going to describe multiple different perspectives. And this means something that's hard for you to do is to keep those straight in your head, because he'll shift from one to the other without telling you, because he's assuming you can follow this easily, because this isn't written for you. This is written for people with PhDs. But I want you to see it and try to do it as best you can. So identify the main thesis as best you can. Identify the historians that Wood is talking about here in his essay. And briefly, and you don't have to state specific things, but what are the arguments? Because there are several different, or there were, things change in the historical profession all the time. There are several different positions you can take on this question of whether or not, was the early republic capitalist or not. And just tell me what those arguments are in brief. Third thing I want you to do, and this is, you're going to hate me for this, is take a look at his footnotes, because there are footnotes at the bottom of the page. This is how academic historians do history, right? In order for a scholar to judge the quality of your work, he has to see what sources you're using. You can't just make assertions about the past in a scholarly argument without backing it up with evidence. Evidence usually cited in the footnotes. So go through it after you've read it a couple of times probably. Take a look at the footnotes. See what types of sources he's citing. Again, he'll be citing other historians. Those are secondary sources, art journal articles, other books, stuff like that. What about the primary sources? You'll see he quotes liberally from primary sources. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards. What types of things is he quoting? Can you tell? Is he quoting letters? Is he quoting published pamphlets? Is he quoting newspapers? Is he quoting books from the 18th century or 19th century? What's he citing? And then 4, again, try to get a sense of how Wood's take on this question. It differs from the other historians he mentions in the essay. And this is kind of tied to 1. Can you identify what his main argument is? It's not that easy. It's not easy at all. Don't worry, by the way, whether or not you get these things right. I don't expect you, most of you aren't going to get this stuff totally right. It's okay. But I want you to have this skill. It's a skill I want you to try to pick up. Because as you go through college, you're going to have to read stuff like this in different subjects. So, and it's a different, trust me, when I first got to college and I have a PhD, it was like, what is this? So it's a different sort of thing. And I've actually provided, you can see there the grading rubric, I've actually provided for you in that module a brief, it's a little article called Reading Scholarly Articles in Books and Journal Articles. And it goes through and it gives you, I'll click on it here and show you, excuse me, what it looks like, but it gives you some pointers about how to read scholarly articles. It goes through, how to understand the argument, so take a look at that and maybe give you some pointers if you need some help. But the thing is, for an assignment like that, you're going to have to read. Again, you should read the primary sources for the first assignment carefully. Read carefully. Don't just read through to get to the end as fast as possible. Read to try to understand what they're saying a little bit when you do it. Then finally, your last writing assignment, the book review of the book Complicity. And I give you basically 4 items here. The book, by the way, is fascinating. It's an interesting work. It is not, by the way, a scholarly work. I didn't want to give you anything that long and that difficult. I want you to be interested in history, and it's a fascinating book. But why? Because if you don't know, the book was published in 2005. It began life in, I think, 2002 as a special section of the Hartford Courier, which is the main newspaper in Hartford in Connecticut. Because some of the people journalists at that newspaper discovered that the newspaper itself, which goes back to the 18th century, had actually once upon a time, the actual newspaper itself had actually owned slaves. And so they investigated this, and it was so popular that they turned it into a book. And it's a really interesting look at the ways in which the North, even after the North, because there was slavery in the northern colonies in the colonial period, it begins to disappear in the early republic. It's gone by the 1830s, and yet it's still kind of connected, especially economically, to the South and with the institution of slavery. And it goes through a lot of ways you wouldn't think of. And it's well written. It's exciting in some ways. I like it. But it also has a lot of information I didn't know until I read the book. So that's why I'm giving it to you. In any event, for the review, and this is a skill you'll do book reviews in college. 1, briefly summarize its contents. 2, identify the thesis of the book or the author's, in this case, plural author's purpose in writing it. And you'll see I just gave you basically the purpose in writing it. Kind of, it's implied in the title, but easy question, but it's a question you always have to answer. 3, detail what kinds of evidence the authors provide for their thesis. And what I mean by that is, don't just cite a couple of things in the paper. Tell me as many different types of evidence as you can find. And they cite a lot of stuff. It's an interesting book because it's not scholarly, but they did research. You can do research and do real history and not be a scholar, by the way. And there's lots of interesting images in that book, lots of interesting different, one of the chapters deals with a trial. So there's legal evidence. There's all sorts of stuff in there. So, and this assignment, remember, is not a response paper. I didn't get to 4 to tell me how persuasive their argument or their account is. That's more your opinion. But it should be informed by some critical analysis. I don't care about your feelings. I don't. Do that in another class. Tell me what you know based on what you've read. Answer those questions. Stick to analyzing the book. Don't pass judgment on it. Again, I don't care if you hate it. I don't care if you love it. Try to be detached. But to me, a good historian tries to keep his personal feelings out as much as you can. You can't do that totally, obviously, but as much as you can. You want to see things clearly, and it's hard to do that when you're indulging in that. Evaluate the author's use of evidence. Is it convincing? Do they make claims that are too broad for that evidence to support stuff like this? Remember that primary sources are more important than citing other historians when evaluating, an historical argument. So all those other sorts of things. I gave you the format. Should be one right there. I'll change that. Make that well clear. There's the grading rubric, and that's out of 100 points. So those are your written assignments. Now, a couple of other things. Let me. I'll also give you a little guide for if you've never done a book review before. Again, it's a few pointers on this stuff. I guess I can take a look at it briefly. If you need ideas for how to write a book review, again, this is not even a scholarly book review. Again, just some things to think about, about what type of, when you read the book, take notes, right? What types of things are you looking for here? And it gives you the following components normally and it gives you a sample book review. So there you go. So if you need help, it's all right there for you. One last thing about assignments in this course. It's a lot of work, of course. You'll see here, by the way, this is my view of the module. The final exam will not be made available to you until the later part of the course. You don't need to worry about it anyway until December, but you'll be able to access it later on. Again, won't have to worry about it until then. One last thing, by the way, the module, all the quizzes are contained here as well. They're also, I didn't mention this, they're all in the modules, individual modules right there as well. Finally, you're going to have a couple of opportunities. If you want to do extra credit, it's right here. And you'll have two options. One is to visit some living history. And this is for people who live in the KC area. If you're taking this somewhere else, I apologize. But it's only open to people who live in the area. By going to the Shawnee Indian Mission in Fairway, Kansas. You can go their website there. It's an old Indian mission. It was run by the Methodist Church, if I'm not mistaken, from the 19th century. And they have a museum there. It's pretty decently well done. It's free. You can walk in. You don't have to pay anything. And you're going to learn about this stuff from your reading your textbook and the major problem source reader. So what you'll do for this is write a 1 or 2 page write-up on the museum. Tell me what you learned there and how the mission itself, how do you connect that to what you've learned in the class? Pretty simple. Along with this write-up, I also, when you go there, want you to take a selfie with one of the docents. Docents are some of the volunteers in a museum from the mission, and then upload it along with your paper. You let me know that you actually did it, but also just that, you enjoy talking to the volunteers. Those volunteers are there because they love history. So that'd be a fun thing to do. Turn this in. Everything's fine. It's pretty easy. And I'll add 3% to your final overall grade for the course. That's extra credit option number 1. So add 3% for visiting the Indian mission. Option 2 is a little more involved because you have to write more. And this will be a film review. And this will be a film review which you'll have to rent or check out from your local library and watch the film 12 Years a Slave. Won many Academy Awards, won several years ago, which is a film based on the account of the life of Solomon Northup, a free black man from the state of New York who was kidnapped and sold into slavery in 1841. And your review of the film should in some way address how what you've learned in the class from the assigned readings jives with the film, basically. In other words, I'm trying to get you is, okay, how accurate is the film compared to what you've learned in class? And then you're going to be graded on this point wise. It's worth 80. You have down here, you can see it's 80 points for the assignment. You have to at least get a B, which is 64 out of 80 points, in order to get the extra credit for this. So I'm evaluating this one a little more closely. You have directions there, basic stuff, grammatical stuff. A couple of things you need to do for it. One, provide a review of the basic contours of the film. You can talk about the acting or the sets and stuff like that, anything film-wise. I want you to understand it as a film, right? It's one of the reasons I want you to do this too, is that, and sometimes I assign this as an assignment in the course, but to get a sense of where dramatic reconstructions of an event are different from the event itself. And then address the historical accuracy and authenticity of the film relative to the assigned readings. You don't have to do any research for this, but if you want to, you can cite the assigned text for the course and just put the page number in parentheses, as long as you make clear which textbook you're talking about. If you want to do some internet research for this, you can. It's not necessary, but do not cite Wikipedia or any other online encyclopedia. So those are your two options for the course. Now there is the outline of everything. It's a lot's involved. It's a lot of work. But a couple of more things I want to go and talk about just briefly. Again, the textbooks. I'm going to hold on one moment. I'm going to share my Kindle version of Major Problems in American History, which is, you can see it here, 4th edition. See what it looks like. And chapters, just to go, a couple of things here. The first chapter is Old Worlds Make New Ones. The way this thing works is going to give you questions at the beginning of the chapter. It gives you an introduction. It's laid out for you, right? You don't have to actually go into libraries and look for sources. They're presented for you in this book. But what you would do, if you were looking for history, and this is one of the things I want to talk about, is what history is, again, in a scholarly sense. They give you this introductory section, which I have you read, on primary and secondary sources, because what you would do as an historian is sometimes you go into this and you have a question and you don't know what the answer is, and you have to look for sources. So you go look through old archives, you look through old buildings, stuff. You have to go search for it. It's like a scavenger hunt. And what you want to find is a primary source. And this is something that's going to be on the quiz question, be on an exam question, is what's the difference between a primary and secondary source? A primary source is a piece of evidence that survived from the period you're studying, from the past. So again, you want to know about George Washington? Read his letters. Those are primary sources from the past. Again, what is a secondary source? A secondary source is called that, as it says there, because it's removed from primary sources. Primary sources are from the period of the past that you're looking back at. Secondary source is the work of an historian, and not just, by the way, anybody can write history, not just people with PhDs. But in a scholarly sense, people have looked at a lot of primary sources to inform their narrative. Generally speaking, if you don't look at but a couple of sources, people aren't going to take your narrative seriously. And it's crucial for the way that modern scholars understand the past, how we know what the past is like. So that's something I want you to keep in mind. And as you read through this, just to show you again what the major problems looks like, the reader, it gives you a little introduction, intro, questions to think about. So it gives you stuff to think about when you're reading through these sources. Again, don't steal those questions. That's plagiarism, but it gives you an idea of what things you might ask in discussion, and then gives you introduction to the documents. You can see here, it gives you a description, a modern description of Iroquois creation story. It gives you images. This is from the Naz text in 1540. More images, European map makers, gives you other stuff, gives you a letter from Christopher Columbus. And at the end of every chapter, besides all this, it gives you a couple of essays, usually selections from longer works, either journal articles or books, by contemporary historians. So they give you both, they give you 7 or 8 primary sources with a couple of essays at the end. And so get to see what historians make out of those primary sources. A lot of times, sometimes in these essays, they'll actually cite stuff that they have in the earlier part of the chapter. So that's going through, I want you to have, think about this stuff. You should think differently about the primary sources because, again, they're from the time period in question. You're getting an Englishman from 1584 telling you about how he's trading with Indians in 1584, Native Americans for the first time. The questions you would ask of that primary source very different than you would ask about Neil Salisbury in his little article, The Indian's Old World. So different questions, different sources. So it goes back to that. Okay, so let me, whoops. Hold on for 1 second. Put this. Okay, back on the actual modules. Yeah, I think that in terms of that is that. I want to go back and talk about real briefly just the course itself and what you're going to learn. Normally in my face-to-face courses, I would do lectures. I won't do that here. You've got the primary narrative of the textbook. But I want to talk about the sweep of history, the big picture of it. Because one of the things that you're going to have in this course, you're going to go from, again, the 1450s all the way up to the 1870s, covering 4 centuries of history, from being this, colonial project of a bunch of Englishmen, and not just Englishmen, a bunch of British people and Europeans, to making up a new nation, and becoming, almost by the end of this, except for the Civil War, America is about to become a great power in the world. Whereas they had been born on a colonial rebellion against the mother country. And in addition to all this research and primary sources and all that stuff, time to reflect in your questions. When you ask stuff, you ask big questions. You're going to read stuff about slavery. That stuff's always in the news today, obviously. Talk about it. Do it politely, by the way. Don't be rude. Don't be aggressive. But this is a place for big questions. What is the United States? What is America? What's the meaning of it? Your ancestors did a lot of amazing things. If you came to this country, you built it, they also did some bad things. And you have to weigh those things, and you have a chance to do that in this class, which you won't have to do in your daily lives. So, in taking advantage of that, I just to wrap up here, I'm not going to waste your time too much more here. The way I tend to think of the United States history is as a sort of, it's a modern nation, right? Here, let me stop this share and I'll just bring you back. It's getting dark out, so you can't see me very well. So the light is dying. And so anyway, briefly, what is, what's the United States, right? The history of your country. I want you to enjoy this as much as possible. I love history. I have a passion for it. Hope you guys get something out of it more than just, I know you're doing this for a grade. That's cool. That's fine. I don't judge. You got jobs, most of you, or busy schedules. Understand that, but this is a chance to reflect on the larger world you live in. Why do you live in a country that has these types of laws other than that? I have a friend of mine who's an older gentleman, older than me. I'm 44, so he's pretty old, but I remember him telling me, and people come up to me and tell me this unbidden sometimes. I never used to like history, but then, something else. Well, my friend told me I never used to like history until I had started paying taxes. I want to know why I had to pay these taxes. So, why are things the way they are? Now, there may not be, historical answers to a question like that. Why, but it may be, right? That's one reason to study history. Another reason to study, of course, is to know where you came from. It gives you some bearings in the world. It's a chaotic world, if you haven't noticed. We lived through a pandemic. We lived through lockdowns, which a lot of people were upset with. We lived through turbulent times with elections being contested. Hopefully this course will give you some background into this and even as a sort of asynchronous, guided course basically for you here. And I tend to see the United States as a modern nation, which is it's not like in the Middle Ages in Europe, right? The origins of pre-modern countries are sort of shrouded in they're not recorded. They kind of go back before that, whereas the United States was born on the public stage in historical time. It was recorded minutely by people involved, and so it's kind of it didn't come fully formed. Its identity and who it was, what was going to be, and everything. It's much more settled now because we have a lot of history behind us, but still, it's something to think about how it got created, why it got created, and what that legacy is for us here in the present tense in the 21st century. So that is it. That is the introduction to the course. You'll be seeing from me. I'll post videos occasionally just to touch base with you, so you can kind of see my face and know that I'm actually here. And but I'll also be hearing from me in discussion forum every week. So have any questions? If you have any questions about the course, please email me. Let me know. And I'll try to respond to you as quickly as I can. So, but anyways, I hope you have a great semester. I hope you guys get something out of the course, and you'll be hearing from me soon. So take care, you guys. Have a great